We follow the Supreme Court and we turn to that breaking news. Here is this new Supreme Court ruling. It deals President Trump another loss. This is a late Friday decision which halts Trump's attempted deportations. The loss cuts to the heart of the deportation agenda we've seen here, stopping Trump from efforts to rush deportations through by claiming these new powers and requiring the due process that his administration has been trying to crush. That's simply what the ruling does, and we're going to break down how. Here, though, first is the broad coalition that ruled against Trump late today, Friday. On the result, it's 7-2, including all Trump appointees joining the decision that deals him this new loss. It's the same coalition the court had in the earlier round in this case, which was an emergency ruling blocking deportations. Today, Justice Kavanaugh again ruled against Trump. He also concurred to add a process point that he would have the court take the rest of the case sooner, basically. All of this is bad news for Trump, who's acted like the court would maybe back him on everything that he wants because in his mind he won that big immunity case last year. He seemed to reference it at times dealing with Justice Roberts, the Chief Justice. Meanwhile, Trump's lawyers have been deliberately testing and sometimes breaking rules to try to see if they can get things fast-tracked to the Supreme Court so they might get granted new powers. Today's written ruling against Trump comes just after oral arguments where justices were very skeptical of Trump's other power claims. That was yesterday. And this also suggests an unusually fast and strong pushback to a president this early in his term. Legal experts say that is probably needed precisely as the proportionate response to given how radical President Trump has been acting, at least in these first 100 days of the term. Now, here are the details. We'll do it in plain English. First, the court majority found Trump's deportation plans break due process. That's the essential rules that protect you and any other resident in the U.S. against federal agents or police abusing your rights or mistakenly imprisoning or deporting you when they could have the wrong person. The court finding the Trump administration was crushing people's ability to exercise due process rights, which surely does not pass muster. Now, second, the Supreme Court rejected Trump's request to basically try to reboot and restart those particular type of deportations. We're not talking about all deportations, which continue in this country, like many countries that have immigration enforcement, but we're talking about these particularly controversial ones where he wanted to use war powers. And so the court in this new ruling found that President Trump is enjoined from removing any of these people suing and other basically similar people. The court uses other language, but they're referring to folks who might be removed under the Alien Enemies Act pending order. So that means this effort is now blocked. Federal agents cannot deport those particular people. And agents know they'd be risking their own careers and punishment if they break what is now, tonight, a clear Supreme Court order. Third, this ruling rebukes Trump's bid to try to rush and game the system. His agents were basically testing judges by seeing if they could just rush people out of the country without the due process and then tell judges, well, they're gone, so you don't have any jurisdiction over them anymore. If you've been following the news, you've seen that trick or ploy play out in some cases, but the court is saying that stops. It was most dramatically and kind of immaturely demonstrated, that approach, when Trump's top diplomat, Marco Rubio, posted an oopsie message online dealing with the very serious allegation that they had intentionally deported people, ducking judicial oversight because they allegedly did it after the judge had ordered, in that case, planes to turn back around. Now, today's order puts a stop to that type of lawless gamesmanship, but it also still leaves the final decision on these attempted powers for another day. And I can tell you tonight, that's how it's supposed to be. Cases go up the courts over time. And in the modern era, that happens without an administration in bad faith trying to cut the courts out of that process with these sort of ploys. In fact, it's interesting, I'm going to point out here that Trump appointee Kavanaugh refers to that today. I told you he wrote separately while joining with the big 7-2 majority against Trump, but he wrote separately noting that this ruling blocks Trump deportations by ensuring judges, quote, can decide whether these Venezuelan detainees may be lawfully removed before they are in fact removed. That is a reference to things working as they should rather than being gamed by Trump. And the point is, of course, an implicit criticism of that kind of Trump plot, where they were trying allegedly to remove and deport people before judges could rule on whether those moves, some of them, maybe none or maybe some, were in fact illegal. And if you think about that, of course, that's a blueprint for trying to get away with any illegal things. All of these are setbacks for Trump, suggests this case faces an uphill battle. But as Kavanaugh did note, the ruling blocks Trump's policy for further review in the courts. The Supreme Court has not made any of those final rulings, which take more time. Nicole Wallace and I were discussing that process, and sometimes you get these decisions later on in the process. Well, they haven't made a final merits ruling on the larger power grab that's attempted by Trump here. Will this court grant Trump those new wartime powers that he clearly says he wants to wield against migrants from countries that we're not at war with? We don't know yet. But this is a new ruling and it has some clues that the 7-2 coalition is skeptical of some of these kind of power grabs. And that's striking because, remember, these past cases in general in American history, they do grant presidents, any president, a lot of power, a lot of broad kind of authority over immigration and national security. Immigration, for example, is something where there are laws set, but then the president enforces them. There's not a lot of back and forth with Congress on day-to-day activities. Ties, jump balls, they go to the president. But that's also bad news for Trump because, in other words, presidents get room for bold strokes and even some reasonable, honest errors. So it takes a lot for the court to block a president's entire use of a lane of immigration powers in real time, which is what's happening to Trump. And that relates to a fourth point in the ruling today. This court notes how Trump has not facilitated the return of the mistakenly deported man to El Salvador, Alberto Garcia, an individual who's now been caught up in all of this international gamesmanship. Trump basically confessed he could follow that court order, could get him back, but he's not gonna, at least for now. It's something the president actually admitted in one interview, and other officials have implied as much. And so now we're learning for the first time the court referring to that today, noting the Trump administration asserts it is unable to provide for the return of an individual it deported in error to the prison in El Salvador. And then it has the citation, that's lawyer speak, but the court is clearly referencing in the case there, Abrego Garcia versus Trump Homeland Security. So the court there refers to that under the word unable. And I don't want to be too lawyerly here, but it's interesting. They say unable when any news viewer now knows President Trump put it more darkly. Not that he was unable, and if you're unable to follow a certain order, sometimes that's a type of defense, but rather that he could, but he won't. Now, the ruling previews the fact that Garcia has a strong case. Doesn't mean he'll win, but he has a strong case. The court saying today, for the first time, in Garcia versus the Trump administration, Mr. Garcia's interests are, quote, particularly weighty. Again, that doesn't resolve it, but it tells you this isn't a jump ball. He has weighty or strong interests, which is what you'd expect for someone stuck in a foreign prison when the people who sent them there admit it was a mistake and he shouldn't even be there. And they could bring him back, but they won't. Now, the skepticism from this court was also clear in a related issue about citizenship and immigration, but not this case. The wider question of whether executive orders can rewrite the Constitution. Legal spoiler alert, that's never been the case. But we heard skepticism from multiple justices in Thursday's oral arguments.
Why would you ever take this case to us?
Well, Justice Kagan asked my questions better than I could have.
Did I understand you correctly to tell Justice Kagan that the government wanted to reserve its right to maybe not follow a Second Circuit precedent?
Your argument seems to turn our justice system, in my view at least, into a catch-me-if-you-can kind of regime.
They're finding these actions illegal because they're exceeding existing authority.
I don't understand how that is remotely consistent with the rule of law.
That's the skepticism. Meanwhile, there's new criticism of Trump leaning into parts of the trappings of autocratic government. We saw the foreign trip, cozying up to people that he once called terror funders, seeking a huge gift from their king, prepping his own military parade. Now his administration erecting a controversial banner of his face that adorns a federal building. This is not typically what you see in America. It doesn't break any particular law, but it's a vibe. Trump also has pushed talk of breaking constitutional limits, like ruling past 2029. Then he walked back that claim under fire, while also pushing other anti-democratic moves. He's pushed out several FBI directors, undercutting the traditional 10-year term that tries to fight partisanship. He's raged against the very first one he memorably fired, James Comey. Of course, all Comey did to upset Trump was testify under oath. Investigations found it to be truthful, but that got him not only Trump's ire or anger, which is perfectly fine, you can have that feeling, but rather alleged abuse of government powers. Trump openly advocated investigating or jailing him as an opponent, attacked him in the first term. There was an unusual tax audit, remember that, which raised questions about whether that was intrusive retribution. And now this week, Trump seizing on Comey's Instagram post, which would be laughable if this was not a pretext for serious government abuse. You are looking at a very simple thing that Comey says he observed walking on the beach, seashells spelled out referencing 86ing 47, a kind of reference to opposing the 47th president, which of course is the current president, Donald Trump. 86 refers to something being sold out. It actually dates all the way back to 1930s soda counter slang. Webster's Dictionary's website explained, and this was written up long before this week, it means to throw out, to get rid of, refuse service to. Others, though, have at times also tried that slang out to reference taking someone out or something sinister. It's just not the original definition. Now, some people alleged Comey's post was some kind of, quote, call to violence. He denied that, and out of caution, even removed the post. So keep all of that seashell history in mind, because now Trump and his aides are using the seashells to fan an allegation that this was a real serious threat. Because an actual threat against the president is a crime. Law enforcement agencies under Trump say they're going to use this now to seriously investigate Comey. And anyone who's followed government probes know that could pick up steam, move into other topics. Politically, top Republicans are piling on quite irresponsibly for Comey's arrest, allegedly over the seashells. Now, the point here is not to get mired in the details or slang about seashells, okay? Details on seashells. But rather, how silly it might seem, it is part of a broader, blatant playbook to grab anything, to attack, to intimidate, to chill criticism, hoping that others who might be different than James Comey or have years left in any kind of job say, well, I'll just hold back on these debates. It's an agenda that Democrats are now warning will require a strong and fearless response, even as others, sometimes in powerful positions, have admittedly compromised or been giving in this early part of the second Trump term. Here's some of the clear pushback, including from Senator Sanders.
Obviously, we have got to fight Trump.
I just think it's about intimidation and bullying.
He is the most dangerous president, perhaps in American history. To give in to Trump is to allow him now to say, I gotcha. All right? And anybody who speaks up against me, you're in trouble.
Former FBI Director James Comey is now under investigation after posting a photo to social media, an image the Trump administration says it considers a threat against the president.
He's going after universities. I mean, all of this is going after law firms who've represented clients that he didn't like.
A CEO said to me last week, I don't want them to Harvard me.
This is what authoritarianism is about.
You need to not be afraid. You need to speak. You need to be saying to people who want to use fear as a way to silence you that you still have a First Amendment right.
Don't be afraid. Use your rights. Trump has turned back to Comey after years of pushing and normalizing the idea that he could and should abuse power to go after opponents. That's what animated, remember, the first impeached offense, abusing power, demanding a foreign legal probe of the Bidens. And we heard from all kinds of credible witnesses about that. There's been a whole range of retribution targets you see here. They went after the law firms already in the first 100 days, the free press with litigation, some of it legal, but some of it demanding all kinds of special treatment or censorship, and a slew of higher ed universities, all of this comes together where we see two big themes. One, even all of the Trump appointees on the Supreme Court late Friday saying, hold up, we're blocking your powers. You've gone too far and you need to follow court rulings. And that's something. But against that, you have a president who's not exactly backing down in the first skirmish. And as Andrew Weissman, a longtime DOJ vet, put it, this is a time for First Amendment rights and democracy, not for fear. With that in mind, we have special guests on this breaking Supreme Court news. I'll be back with you in 90 seconds. We're joined by former federal prosecutor Ankush Khardori, who's been following many of these legal developments also as a legal writer for Politico. We have a ruling here that broke late on Friday. Ankush, Friday is when some of these things happen. Not for any special legal reason, but the normal reason that Nicole Wallace and I were discussing. This confirms, doubles down, continues a coalition of Supreme Court justices pushing back, at least against aspects of the denial of due process in immigration by Trump. Your views of what's in here?
Yeah, I mean, I found it to be quite striking in multiple respects. You're right, it's the same coalition, including 3 Trump justices. But in addition to brushback against the Justice Department, I think this was a pretty serious brushback to the Fifth Circuit and to the district judge in this case, too. Because you can see that the Supreme Court is not happy with the way that they handled this, and they think they're being too casual and not taking the issue seriously enough. And the
just
other
slow
thing,
down and tell us, because let me slow you down on that point. So we have all these circuits, they number them, but this is more of a Southern, some people call it more MAGA-friendly appeals court. Just tell us in more detail what you're getting at.
Yeah, so this all began because there was a suggestion by the lawyers for detainees that there were imminent deportations that were about to happen. Now, something else the Supreme Court told us today is that that was correct. In fact, more correct than they knew at the time. So the lawyers for the detainees then go to a district court early one morning and say, we have a request for a temporary restraining order. The judge sits on it all morning, which is very unusual. District court judges, when they get TROs, they're supposed to go right to the top of their to-do list. Sits on it, and then sort of slow rolls it a little, which is why then the lawyers for the government then had to go to, the lawyers for the detainees then had to go to the Fifth Circuit and the Supreme Court effectively simultaneously. Supreme Court then did what it did, which was to halt the deportations, which was the first of now this pair of decisions. But in the meantime, the Supreme Court said, well, the Fifth Circuit, you need to consider this. Fifth Circuit evidently said, well, no, this isn't right for our consideration because the detainees have misconstrued effectively what happened down below before the district court. They didn't give them enough time. And what the Supreme Court has effectively said in this decision is like, no, Fifth Circuit, you need to deal with this. You were wrong. And you can just tell by the way they're describing the facts that they see these judges as moving far too quickly and not taking these issues seriously enough.
Yeah, and so I know you had other points, but just to continue on that, I'm reading from page 3 of this ruling, which includes the Trump appointees. And now that you've helped us all kind of keep in our mind what we're talking about, Fifth Circuit, the Southern Court, which, again, to be as respectful as possible, you could say they really had a different view of the urgency. If you wanted to be more skeptical, when you could say they were almost trying to do the Trump administration a solid, which is not what independent, fair-minded judges are supposed to do with timing games. And to your point, I'm reading now from the ruling. This is breaking news, so we don't have all of this in our neat write-up, so pardon me, but I'm going to read. It says the Fifth Circuit, quote, erred in dismissing the detainees' appeal. Goes on to say they could do this. They basically had the jurisdiction, so don't mess around. Then they say a district court's inaction, what you were referring to, in the face of, quote, extreme urgency and a high risk of potentially irreparable harm, which in some cases we've seen people end up in the wrong prison, is a consequence where you have to deal with it. And they go on to say the district court's inaction, quote, not for 40 minutes, 42 minutes, but for 14 hours plus, had the effect of refusing an induction to detainees facing an imminent threat of severe irreparable harm. Therefore, we reject what they did. It is pretty close to how the ACLU would describe the situation, no?
Yes. I mean, I think it is fair to say that justices were not pleased with how the Fifth Circuit handled this situation. And effectively, they gave the detainees what they had asked for from the Fifth Circuit. And they said, look, we're going to give you what you asked for, a halt, and we're sending it back to the Fifth Circuit. And our order here is going to remain in place until there is a disposition, not just of the Fifth Circuit, at the Fifth Circuit level, but a disposition of a writ of certiorari from the Fifth Circuit decision. So this is all very, very unusual. And I do think it reflects some evident frustration on the part of those 7 justices.
Yeah, and where the lines are. And then what was the other part of the ruling you wanted to hit?
Oh, I was just, we touched upon it. I mean, I think it is quite striking that the Supreme Court explained in its opinion that the plans to deport these people were actually further along during this very brief period, that the planes were effectively already lined up. Now, bear in mind that as all of this was unfolding, the Justice Department was at a different court, which this is also described in the opinion, a different court playing very coy about all this, right? Really refusing to give them any kind of details about what was going on, suggesting maybe that it was overwrought. Alito somehow is still holding the line on that, even now in his dissent, suggesting that the suggestion was somehow overwrought. And clearly it was not. And 7 justices, I imagine, are not particularly pleased about feeling like they are being gamed. And I think that's also coming through in the tone of the comments, however succinct, about the Kilmar-Abrego Garcia case, because there is a through line here, which is you have the administration in these deportation settings attempting to effectively game the procedures and to try to evade all these procedural requirements and get out from under these Supreme Court decisions and other decisions. And these are things that the judges, judges with some sense of integrity and obligation to their office, take very, very seriously.
Yeah. I really appreciate your breakdown and interesting kind of compare notes on the brand new ruling we got. So appreciate it. Our leadoff guest on this one, Ankush Khardori. Thank you. Have a great weekend. I want to tell everyone we'll be wishing you a good weekend by the end of the hour, aided by The Office, Hangover, and Daily Show star Ed Helms coming up.
As you know, the vice president only speaks at conservative-friendly audiences. He was somehow exposed to a small amount of dissent and suffered a mild reaction.
Dissent?
Yes, John. The vice president is extremely allergic to dissent.
Nowadays as well. Ed will be here by the end of the hour. But next, Ruth Ben-Ghiat on the imagery and the autocratic threat. A lot of news on this Friday. We're joined by NYU history professor Ruth Ben-Ghiat, an expert on authoritarianism, the author of Strongmen Mussolini to the Present. Welcome, Ruth. This is one of those Fridays where you have all the conflicting signals, and we went through a lot of them to the top of the show. The pretty remarkable coalition against Trump's power grab at the Supreme Court, ruling again late today, but against a lot of these other moves. Your thoughts here? And what he's trying to do or get away with.
So it's pretty remarkable that the same court that gave him immunity for official acts is now pushing back. And I think, there is no parallel, Ari, for in early Putin or early Erdogan or early months of Orban for the speed and magnitude of what has happened to our democracy in just a few months. And, the essence of authoritarianism is the executive trying to expand his power over the civil service, making it a tool of tool of his personal will because it's all loyalists. Of course, the judiciary is key. And also creating a personality cult. And Donald Trump is very attentive to imagery. And so having his face, next to Lincoln's on the outside of buildings and giant format is certainly part of that, as is him trying to say that he's all powerful and really no one can stop him. And I think as they're escalating this because of the legal resistance that's come on. And the reason, when you were talking about Abrego Garcia before, the reason he says, I could get him back, but I won't, is that if he said, okay, I could get him back and I will get him back, that would be seeming to bend to requests that he be accountable. And his whole thing as a strongman is that he's above the law, that he's untouchable and he doesn't have to respect domestic or international law because that's a sign of weakness in the autocratic mind.
And then you look at the way they pick their targets. He's talked about a lot of different perceived foes. But it's very notable now as we track 110 days. He's starting with what they perceive to be the weaker, softer targets in a lot of the retribution. Local officials or judges who people haven't really heard of. So they don't necessarily have an idea that, maybe not all Americans know of and love Jack Smith, but his history, having prosecuted members of both parties, prosecuting John Edwards, a Democrat, for corruption, prosecuting war crimes at The Hague. There's a lot of evidence that he would be a tougher, sturdier foe with a lot of credentials, a lot of elite type, powerful people going, that guy. But they go after the state judge. They go after a local mayor now. That trial continues. There were rumors about something else today, which is a news person I'm not going to confirm, but they involved questions about DOJ going after another person. And then, of course, Comey, which is reportable because they're announcing it. And as I said, the seashells photo would be laughable if the agenda weren't so anti-dissent and anti-democratic. So talk us through what's going on there. It's not necessarily day one, the doomsday of every prosecutor who's ever investigated him is immediately indicted like a movie. But it seems to be trying to push up and normalize the idea that this is what a government can do, that
Yes.
James Comey will face whatever it is, his third probe.
Yeah, the Comey is very disturbing because, in Turkey, for example, Erdogan has put forth hundreds of thousands of, they're called insult suits. It's like a genre of lawfare, autocratic lawfare. And a social media post, just observing something and recording it, as Comey did, can be grounds for, in Turkey, being imprisoned and put on trial. And again, 160,000 Turks have been subjected to this. And there are similar things that go on in Russia and all autocracies. So your other point about having lower level judges people are not familiar with, they haven't bonded with them. This is what autocrats do. They do test cases. They do test cases to see how the public responds, but also to show, as you said, that they can get anyone. So, in fact, it's huge news that was not, perhaps with all the other things going on. One of the hallmarks of authoritarianism is you start arresting the political opposition. And so the mayor of Newark was arrested on some kind of trumped up case, as it seems. And so this is, for me, looking at this was a red line that they crossed. And, as far as the Wisconsin judge, during the whole Biden administration years, the Trump and MAGA waged a very effective campaign to discredit and delegitimize the judiciary, understood democratically. And so they were insulting judges, threatening judges. And so this is an escalation of that to show that anybody in any state who displeases the administration can become a target. And that's exactly how authoritarian states operate.
Right. And as you say, documenting it and being clear about it helps the fact-based community, of which there are still many people, to know where the lines should be. And geography, what's happened in other places with power-hungry people with no scruples, and history is instructive. So again, we rely on you for that, and we appreciate your time, Professor. I'm going to fit in a break and tell folks that we will stay on the case, but it's not all gloom and doom. We have the comic Ed Helms by the end of the hour.
A lot of people here, for some reason, think it's funny to steal someone's personal property and hide it from them. Here's a little news flash. It's not funny.
It's not funny, especially if you scream about it. So that is going to be, we hope, fun or funny by the end of the hour. We also have another update on the trial that is so important, potential accountability for defendant Combs. That's coming up. Today marks the end of the first week of the federal sex trafficking trial of Sean Diddy Combs. One of the key witnesses, a former longtime partner of Combs, Cassie Ventura, finished testimony after 4 difficult days on the stand. She recounted years of testimony, basically recounting this abuse, and she explained some of the complexities which the prosecution wants to establish so the jury has the nuance of what they say was a a physically violent and abusive relationship that still involved her at times choosing or partaking in a life with Mr. Combs. The defense painted Ventura as basically a willing participant, that she went along with everything and the alleged conduct and benefited from his sort of money and power, that it was not only used against her. Combs, of course, is legally presumed innocent. He faces a mountain of evidence. Ventura said this was chaos and that she wanted approval, but didn't want to live the way she was subjected to. There was reading aloud, for example, of a 2016 text message showing her state of mind at the time that she said she sent to Combs days after this camera beating was caught on camera, saying, "I'm not a rag doll." A witness after her says that abuse occurred. So you have some of it on video, and you have other people corroborating the nature of Mr. Combs' activities and conduct. Dawn Richard was in one of Combs' music groups, testifying that she witnessed him beating Ventura, quote, often, including an incident where he used a skillet of eggs as part of an attack. Ventura's testimony also centered on Combs' drug-fueled parties. These have been likened to freak-offs or after-parties, but the prosecution is arguing they were part of an actual long-running racketeering and sex trafficking operation. She says that when she did try, or if she refused to partake, Combs would then get violent in response, and that she eventually felt like she'd been coerced into working, quote, basically like a sex worker. That statement, though, was then struck from the record. That has to do with the actual facts versus someone's feelings about how they were treated or how they felt the conduct affected them. And the defense tried to say there were inconsistencies in her claim that Combs had raped her in 2018. They pressed on how, quote, clear her memory really was. And Ventura told prosecutors she went through that. Do you have any doubt about it? You can see the answer there. No, she says, there was no doubt in terms of her clear memory of exactly what she says he did to her. This is week one in what will be expected to be a long-running and important case about a type of accountability and Me Too testing of an industry in rap and in Mr. Combs' case that has often evaded this kind of scrutiny. As I mentioned, we've got a lot more coming up in the program, including ending on the high note of Ed Helms. There's one person you hear a little less about these days in the national news, and that's Elon Musk. Got plenty going on, but he's been stepping back from his role in government where the results are mediocre. There was first confusion and chaos with the way that they did some of their cuts. One report from Vox says what turned out to be unsustainable was Musk's role as the decider, the pace at which he tried to ram through changes. This mirrors other blunders that actually are explored in a new, interesting book that reminds us all of the humility of certain types of large-scale efforts. Snafu, the definitive guide to history's greatest screw-ups, is written by the beloved actor Ed Helms. You may know him, of course, from The Office or The Hangover.
Fine, I'll just go sit at my desk and be quiet. Sorry I annoyed you with my friendship. Am I missing a tooth? I can't. Oh. Oh my God. My lateral incisors, it's gone. I have an idea.
What?
Handbrake turn.
What?
I pull the wheel to the left, yank the handbrake, we do a 180, cross the median, drive right past it.
You know how to do that, Dad?
If Vin Diesel can do it, so can I. Parkour! Parkour!
Parkour! I'm right behind you, Andy! Come on! Yeah! There's some snafus in there, too. Joining us now, Beat debut, Ed Helms, the actor, the comic. The new book is already a New York Times bestseller. I've been told a lot of Beat viewers buy books, and it's your choice, but there you see it, Snafu. You can get it right now online or wherever books are sold. Ed, you know, it's the news business, so we have to be honest. Full disclosure, a lot of viewers and fans of yours on this very program, on our team. Thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for that amazing little montage of career highlights. That was fun to watch.
Well, we'll get into the book, but looking at the montage, people feel like you play different characters, but you have an enduring vibe. Do you feel that? Do you know what that vibe is, or you sort of take each character and see what happens?
No, I think that's fair. I think I have a vibe. It varies a little bit from part to part, but yeah, there's something kind of panicky in the characters that I play. And in Hollywood, we as actors we get pigeonholed, and
sure.
And I happen to love the pigeonhole that I got because it's so fun. I get to play these just ridiculous, hilarious characters, and I love it.
It's funny to put it that way. It's a good hole, and it's an overused word maybe in the culture, but your characters sometimes reflect a vulnerability that is very endearing. In The Hangover, it's like, we love this guy, and he makes a mistake, and we love him more because he's just a guy. He's a person. You know what I mean?
That's kind of the magic trick of that movie, is that these guys did terrible things, but then they woke up the next morning and regretted it. And the more they found out about what they did, the more horrified they were. And that's why I think the movie, like, frat boys love the movie and grandmas love the movie. It's like this kind of sweet, perfect mix.
That it's such a great point. I hadn't thought of that. It actually leaves open different viewpoint frameworks, more or less moralized frameworks, and it works. I love that. You mentioned regret. Regret would be a response some would or should have to the stories you're telling in this book. What interested you in sort of large-scale snafus, mistakes, et cetera? Tell us about this.
Well, so I've always just had a kind of curiosity bug. I love going down rabbit holes of curiosity, and history has always been there as just a great thing to dig into. A couple of years ago, I started a podcast called Snafu, and we're 3 seasons in on that. And that's a podcast that goes into sort of a deep dive exploration of these historical screw ups. And it just was so fun. And I was finding so much material in the research that, I don't know, a book seemed like a natural next step. And it's fun because the screw ups are sort of the funny parts of history. So it's a combination of my love of history and my love of comedy. And yeah, it's just been great.
Yeah. Being immersed in this, are there themes you've picked up about what is more likely to stoke the big snafus and mistakes? Like, for example, in law school, when you have like a boring class like tax law, you look over the history, and what you find is the larger the ambition, the more likely that it ended up with what they call the unintended consequence. Oh, we'll do this mortgage thing or this healthcare thing because we want to help. Somebody had an idea to help. And depending on how it was done, by the end, you had all these unintended other problems. But I'm curious themes that you might have found.
Yeah, that's a great, I like looking at it through that lens. There are a number of kind of themes that emerge when you start to look at snafus. One, certainly big cultural moments that sort of heighten cultural tension lead to bad judgment. So, for example, the Cold War, there are a lot of things in the book. There are a lot of stories in the book that are rooted in just Cold War paranoia and crazy decision-making, like the attempt to shoot a nuclear warhead at the moon in the 1950s, which was a plan that was hatched to basically try to scare the hell out of the Soviets. And it's insane. It's absolutely insane. But these are the things that the Cold War brought out of us. The other thing that emerges that you just see over and over again is groupthink, like closed loops of people just sort of like churning on bad ideas, and no one's there to say, hey, this is really, really dumb. And then, of course, hubris, just like human hubris is everywhere. It's all around us all the time.
Yeah, you mentioned Cold War. You write about almost fixation with the CIA trying to assassinate Fidel Castro, which they also could not pull off.
Yeah. Yeah, there were like over 600 ideas floated and like attempts at his life. And they're crazy. Like when you start to look through the list, it feels like a comedy writer's room came up with this stuff. I mean, there was one attempt to put a certain kind of poison into his shoes that would make his hair fall out. The thinking being that that would then, if he lost his beard, he would lose his manliness and therefore his grip on the Cuban public. It's just these
Very
like
Samson and Delilah.
well, sure, yeah, that's a deep cut, but yeah, we can go biblical. It's like, but to me, it's more Looney Tunes. It's like shave his beard and he'll lose his leadership. It's like, so yeah,
that's wild. Do you still get people coming up to you most for the office, or what do they come up most to you for about?
You know, it kind of varies. It depends on where I am. I would say, like, if I'm out at a bar, it's going to be a lot of Hangover fans. I don't hang out in bars that much anymore these days. So if I'm just walking through an airport, it's going to be, it's a lot of Office fans. The Office has just endured in this incredible way, and people almost every day someone's coming up to me, and a lot of times they're telling me some poignant story about how The Office helped their family through a tough time, or it's something they fall asleep to every night because they feel safe watching it in these crazy times. And yeah, I'm always moved by those stories.
I love that. Obviously, you do it in teamwork, but you guys are giving people joy. And no matter what's going on, we need that. We need joy. We need balance. We need a break, which is why this was a great way to end the week. So Ed Helms, thank you. And I'll put the book up again. The book is Snafu, The Definitive Guide to History's Greatest Screw-Ups. You can check that out.